This is the talk of Music City Real Estate.
Welcome back to another episode of the Talk of Music City Real Estate,
where we educate and motivate all things real estate.
My name is Monty Moore with Realty One Group Music City.
Hey, and I'm CareyAnn with CMG Financial and my mortgage team.
Every week we'll be posting a new episode chock full of Nashville real estate value.
Yes, and you can follow along and subscribe at talkmusiccity.com.
Got a question for us? Ask away at questions@talkmusiccity.com.
Monty!
CareyAnn, so good to see your smile.
So good to see you. Look at us. We're twinning today with our black jackets.
We are. And we have a supersonic guest with us today.
She looks like Pretty Woman. She's so beautiful.
Rosalind Ruth of Midtown Title is going to talk about all things timing.
Yes, perfect timing.
And I'm telling you what, if you're newer to the business, less than 3 years, you need to hang on every word here between these two ladies, because it can make the difference between you being your client's superhero or just another real estate agent who didn't know what they were doing. And we don't have those here at Realty One Group Music City, because we want to always educate and inspire to be their best. Okay, so super important topics today. Timing is everything. This came up as a quick example, or what promoted this is one of our agents is closing on a home that's taken a lot longer, like so many right now are taking a little longer to sell. And the buyer, he found out, was supposed to be paying cash. Turns out he's pulling money out of his house in Governor's Club to buy this other home. He and spouse are splitting up, and so they're both pulling from this equity.
Yeah. Is that cash? That's the question. I would dig into that one a little bit more.
It's not cash. Yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
That's why I brought it up today on the huddle call, because it's not uncommon for an agent to call that cash because they're pulling the cash, out of the home. But there's this little thing called this 3-day right of rescission that can mess you up. And that's what was happening here. This was messing them up. And the agent hadn't heard about this little detail before. So what did I do? I brought my phone into Miss Roz, and she was able to go through the details with him and educate him so he could educate his client and look like the superhero.
So good.
Absolutely.
So let's start, Roz. You put together some bullet points. We'll let you lead whatever order of topics you want to talk about. But between the two of you ladies, I'm going to learn some things I know today, and I hope you're listening, because, again, so often many of these things that do happen, like the one I just described, don't happen that often. And but if you're familiar with what can happen and you can talk your way, understand basics of it, you won't look like just a deer in the headlights. You'll understand the process, and that's why we're always trying to equip you to be the authority in the industry, so that your clients never hesitate referring you to their family and friends. Okay.
Absolutely. So true. And I'm going back to the cash thing. I would assume what happens a lot, you and I are only as good as the information provided by the consumer, right, to us, right? So we are, kind of in, handcuffs when it comes to that a little bit. The consumer probably in his mind did assume he was paying cash because he was going to have cash, to be able to, honor that. I think maybe I'm a big supporter of asking lots of questions. And,
Tell me more about that.
Yeah,
Tell me more about that.
And speak into that a little bit more, right? Because in my line of work, and also in yours, one door opens another door that opens another door that opens another door.
That slams one shut. The big one.
And the thing that I always say is, because when we get to the application on the assets, they talk about I have, this much money. And I always ask the next question, have those funds been seasoned, in your savings account or checking account for at least 60 days, right? Because in the eyes of a lender, seasoned money is 60 plus days usually. Some loans allow for 30, and that would be truly considered cash and their own funds, and you don't have to document that as a large deposit. So that may just be a little insert too, and another extra question that you could ask if someone says they do want to pay, cash. The other thing too, I would assume, is you have to show proof of funds,
Correct.
right? Proof
Correct.
of funds. And that might trigger, they are not able to do that at the moment, unless they do show you a line of credit document or something like that. And that would trigger knowing that they have to pull that out. And there's probably a timeline, and that's what we're going to go into a little bit more with each loan scenario.
Absolutely. And we have to remember, one thing as a real estate professional that I'm constantly reminding myself is, this is moving day for a lot of our clients. And it's so easy when we're sitting in our offices or we're not at the site itself to remember that moving is stressful, and there are a lot of working parts and packing everything up and getting the kids enrolled in school and all of those things that come along with moving.
Trucks.
When is the truck coming?
And families come here to help out, and there's so many dominoes.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
what's going to happen with great grandma's china? All of that stuff is a really good perspective giver for me to remember. I hope I never move again. I don't ever want to do it.
On that topic, Ross, I tell the agents all the time, I think, and I don't mean this, but I say it tongue in cheek, is that I think every realtor should have to move every, few years to keep that empathy gland up, because when you're, selling a lot of real estate, you've been having to move for a while, you become kind of, well, it's just not a big deal. It's just this and it's just that. And well, no, it's a really big deal. Every step is a big deal. And so to make sure that you're empathetic through that process, nothing like, Connie and I right now are packing because we're getting ready to move. And it's like, dang, this is going on forever. Is there's another cabinet full of crap? It's just, it goes on and on and on. So there's a lot to be conscious of. So I'm glad you're taking that perspective as well.
So it's easy to remember the things like the moving truck, getting kids enrolled, utilities, but since title and escrow is often really nebulous and really behind the scenes, it's a harder thing to keep at the top of mind, which is where real estate professionals come in, like realtors, who go, I have been warned that there are timing effects of title and escrow, and so I'm going to check with Roz to make sure that when that full moving truck pulls up to the house, my clients get access to that house. When the builder says they have to have money in order to give possession of this new build and property, they've got the money. How do I make that happen? And something I always say is closing is like a clock. There's a clock face, and you see the two hands, and they will both eventually move into closing time. But behind that clock, there are all of these gears and cogs and springs, all of these things that have to work together perfectly and seamlessly in order to make sure that those hands get to closing. And we shield our clients from all of the cogs and gears and messy work so that it doesn't stress them out, but we still need to be aware of them, cognizant, if I may have that pun just now. But this is part of that. So there are a few factors that really hit home on this. The first is a warranty deed. So the warranty deed is my favorite document out of all of the closing documents. Yes, I do have favorites. But the magic of a warranty deed is the second that the seller's signatures go on there, that ink and paper has then just become the worth, has then taken on the value of the purchase price. So if you're selling a house for $400,000, as soon as that ink hits that paper, those documents are worth $400,000. And here's why. As title professionals, when we record in the public record, which is the official gospel of who owns this property, we have to swear that we're in possession of the original. That's to prevent fraud, to make sure that people aren't making copies of bad deeds and pretending to be the seller and recording it. Therefore, in order for me to release buyer's funds, I need to make sure that that is a real warranty deed, that the original is in my possession, and that it's recordable. I will not give my clients funds away and lender funds away until I've got a recordable deed. Well, what happens when that deed is being signed in Texas and we're in Tennessee? What happens when the deed is being signed at 4:00 in Clarksville and we in my office are down here in Franklin, which is an hour 15 generously to...
I just drove it, so yes, very true.
About an hour 15. So those sorts of logistical concepts are part of what we can make plans for ahead of time. Maybe it looks like the seller signing the day before and overnighting us an original warranty deed. Maybe it looks like the two agents on each side coming together and saying, hey, once the transaction is irreversible, even if the wire doesn't make it to your client's account, but it's in the escrow account, do you think the sellers would be comfortable giving possession? And really, it's all about personal style and the comfortability of the buyers and sellers. Maybe they have a rapport. Maybe they'll agree to certain caveats, but not others. Recently, I had an agent call, and she said, well, we really need to get possession because they're delivering lumber to the property. And I said, well, can the lumber be delivered some other time or some other way? And they said, no, it has to stay in the house because it has to acclimate to the home.
It must have been flooring.
I think it was flooring.
Yeah.
I'm a title and escrow expert. I am not a construction expert. But she told me it has to acclimate to the house, so we have to have it delivered. And I said, well, let's see if the sellers would be comfortable with a temporary occupancy just for the lumber, not even for moving in. So we were able to troubleshoot, maintain our timeline, maintain the timeline with the lender and with the sellers, and they were still able to get what they wanted, which was a storage place and an acclimation place for what they needed. So,
Roz, I think one thing I just want to hit on just for a second, because this scenario, which is not uncommon, the lumber is one thing, but I'm just saying that the need for a spirit of cooperation. I try to share with everybody, look, let's represent our clients, but let's represent the integrity of the transaction as well. And in that, what I mean is, let's try to work peacefully throughout that process, because sure enough, I've been many times where somebody just had to play hardball, and then when it gets to the finish line, they're looking for a favor. No, you keep your lumber out. You can put your lumber out in the yard. I'm not going to let you in the house. That kind of thing can happen really often when people try thinking that I'm going to negotiate down to the penny and I don't care about burning bridges, because that's a mistake, and that's a great. Anyhow, that's off the topic, but it's not, because it's working for the integrity of the transaction is critical.
Yeah, and I think backing into all things early is key, right? So when you have a transaction, I think a lot of people, and many of us, make it look so smooth, and like you said, we're the duck with the feet underneath, and everything looks great, on top. But the wise real estate agent knows chaos is happening all the time, and we also know that we are only as good as the consumer and the seller, right? Working together. So planning ahead is key. Asking lots and lots of questions. I cannot, make that more privy to the lender, on the sense of, do you pre-fund your loans? Can you pre-fund this loan? What is your funding process? Because I've worked for a company that before that did not allow you to fund until every single documentation was checked off the list, right? And I had to do a lot of legwork myself just to make sure everything went smooth. Now working at a firm that doesn't require you, and you're very familiar with how to do both sides of that. We grant you the permission to do your job, right? And we expect you to do your job.
That.
Yes. So that makes it a lot easier. But knowing all of those things early on allows you to properly schedule, right? What time? Well, sometimes the lenders want you to close midday or later. Why? Most likely for, to handle the chaos that might be coming in at the last second. We're very blessed that at the time, I don't think any of us thought it was a blessing in disguise, but moving the CD, to sign 3 days before, right? We thought we lost 3 days. Well, everybody's figured out that you still get those 3 days, and your CD sometimes is finalized within those 3 days, which I still think is goofy and crazy. I wish that wasn't the case. But by the time the lender and the title company marry up, right, and actually balance that CD, you may be thinking that happened 2 days ago, right? And that may happen the day before, right? Sometimes, right? By the time you get the true HOA docs in and this in and all the things, right? There's a lot, when we say all the things, there are all the things. There's so many different, factors that come into play. So timing is so key, but it starts with the amazing real estate agent that chooses title company A and is accepting lender, B. And I think what's important is making sure that you marry those two people together, because I think there's an assumption that we're just going to work closely with the title company, and title company is going to work closely with the lender. There are some of us that do believe that, yes, we are in our own lanes, but we need each other to be successful, right? It takes a village to close a transaction. There's some, though, that don't believe that same philosophy. They stay in their lanes and they're anti-lender or anti-title, right? It takes us all working together. That's what I'm a believer in. And we've solved many, many problems together over the years. So timing does start, I think, right at the beginning, you know.
Totally, but I think it starts with the agent conveying that, getting the proper information. Tell me more about the needs, tell me more about the goals and so forth, so that you can be a step or two ahead and not playing catch up at a time where it might be too late. I'll never forget, and I was guilty of this, I never will forget when a builder here in the Mount Juliet area had said, I got to have funds before I let go of the key. Yeah, whatever. My client sitting there in the driveway, this is a few years ago now, sitting in the driveway with the U-Haul truck, under their own pressure of timing, not able to get access to the property because I didn't make sure ahead of time and communicate ahead of time with everybody involved in that to make sure that they had the keys early and not, instead of late. And so it makes, as your real estate professional, it makes you look less professional. That's why I wanted to have this.
Oh yeah, and the other part is the split, right? Closing, and
Absolutely.
that's customary here,
It
right,
is.
in Tennessee for a split. But if builder A wants to use their own title, and you are very gung ho on using your title, right? And sometimes that happens. We got to make sure that the money gets from one to the other, you know, to be able to release it. And there are some hardball, you know, builders out there that will not release, and then unless the money is, you know, there.
And that's where I have to play hardball of, I will not release funds until you deliver that original warranty deed to me. I am advocating for my client, the buyer. They have to have a recordable deed. And so if they are across town or, you know, far away, or logistically this is becoming impossible, we got to close at 4 so we can pick up the kids, et cetera, then we need to start troubleshooting for that, or at the very least set expectations and prepare. Because for some people, they say, oh, moving truck's coming in 2 weeks, no problem,
Right.
everything is great, we
Right.
don't need it by tomorrow. And then some people say, well, moving truck is coming in 2 weeks, Roz, you were correct about that, but we have this mechanic coming in. We have this vendor coming in to do this. So that is possession. It's not just moving. It's your ability to enjoy the property as is needed. To segue off of what you were saying before, CareyAnn, because I remember it, because I remember what I was going to say, is that splits are a really common occurrence here, and we actually have a very great working relationship with most title companies in Middle Tennessee.
When you say splits, for those newer folks, you're talking about each side having their representation.
Each side has their own title company. Essentially, one side does title, the other side does escrow. We'll have another podcast about that someday. But we have a standard procedure that almost every single title company in Middle Tennessee is aware of and works within the boundaries. I always say they're not our coworkers, but they are our coworkers. We need to maintain those relationships and handle that. One of the benefits that I've found working at Midtown is we have so many offices dotted all over Middle Tennessee that I can still protect my clients by demanding that original warranty deed, but we've got a little more flexibility. So maybe maybe the seller's title company is up in Clarksville. I'll say, okay, I'm down in Franklin. Normally, you'd have to schlep that document all the way down here, but instead, how about you drop it off in my Midtown Clarksville office, and I will consider it in the possession of Midtown Title,
perfect.
and we can move. So I am always trying to find creative ways to answer that problem.
Create the solution,
to
love
create
that.
the solution. And not all title companies have those offices dotted all over. And
That's a big deal.
it is a big deal. I also hear from a lot of agents, Well, the title company I use, they will fund on a copy. They don't need the original. Well, I can't speak to other title companies' standards of care for their clients, but to me, having that original warranty deed is the protection. What happens if, God forbid, the car crashes? What happens if this happened to me? What happens if FedEx soaks the warranty in urine by accident? Yep, that's happened. What happens?
That doesn't sound like fun.
We won't
It
ask
was
who's
horrible.
urine. We won't ask who's urine. Lord.
It was bad, and it was the first week of my new assistant, and I had to promise him it
when
wasn't
you mail
normal.
the urine in type of thing. Lord,
It was bad, but all of these things can and
she's still with
have
you.
happened.
And she's still with you.
She's still with us. So
true. Anything can happen.
Anything can happen.
You got to be
Yeah.
thinking 2 steps ahead, and that's kind of like when we do loans. I mean, anything can happen. You got to have a plan B and sometimes a plan C just in case if stuff happens. Again, going back to the timing of it all, right? If you know that there is a lot that's going to happen at the end or the specific closing day, you may tell lender A, right? That you need all of these documents the day before, right? It is okay to say and state your expectations. We are closing and signing on blank date, but my expectation is to have all docs and this loan pre-funded the previous day. It is okay to say that. So I want to make sure you know that as the captain of your own ship, as a CEO of your own business, you have the ability to communicate and share what's needed. Now, lender A says, I cannot make that happen. Well, then at that point, you have the choice to make a decision to change if you want. But you, again, are been hired to represent your client. You have shared with them that you're going to offer this smooth experience. To offer a smooth experience that requires you to maintain control, right? And have the title company and lender kind of working together. Going back to a closing, as we move into 2025 and futuristic ways of all the things that we are moving into, and COVID kind of ignited this, right? There's ways. So a normal closing takes how long to sign all documents?
We budget about an hour for a buyer side, 30 minutes to an hour for a seller side, just depending on how many questions they may have.
Yeah, and that might be an experience that you want your buyers to have. Now, some of these buyers are second buyers, third buyers. They're buying their fourth house, right? They're like, I've done that, been there. Just tell me where to sign. I already know what that document means. I already know what that document means. Another thing that you could start to ask your lender is if they offer hybrid closings. And a hybrid closing is where we grant you, and CareyAnn and my mortgage team offers this, we grant you 95% of all of the documents to be e-signed the day before, okay, within your comfort of your own home, behind the computer. Click, click, click. I understand. And then you meet with Roz and you sign 5 documents, ink sign. Okay. And that grants you probably at that point, less than so much time to be able to get through 5 documents.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Minimal time.
That's
And-
nothing compared to the whole package.
Yes. And I'd like to sing the praises of a good lender is that, especially for buyer side closings, almost all of the questions are directed towards lending. And so having a good lender that prepares their buyer and has already answered their questions about the lending before they meet at the closing table is everything. So many of CareyAnn's clients will be going over the numbers and they'll say, we know. And that too will make a huge difference in the timing of, closing. Speaking of the comfort of your own home and coming into an office, we also have to remember business hours. I know that we are continuing to live in a 24-hour world, and there are definitely some great things about that, but banks are still running on banking hours, and I foresee them doing that for a very long time. And so one issue with timing can be, when am I allowed to send a wire? We're not getting wires at Midtown at 11 o'clock at night. And the reason is all wires have to go through the Federal Reserve. They leave one bank, go to the Federal Reserve, are receipted in by another, and that all has to be done during banking hours. So we will have buyers say, my lender is running really behind. Can I close at 7:00 tonight? Well, I can't get a wire at 7:00 because the Federal Reserve is closed. So therefore, we need to push to the next day. One piece of timing that I find incredibly important, and I don't hear it spoken about a lot, is prep your buyers for how they send their cash to close wire. Time and time again, I would say probably 2 or 3 times every month, I get a call from a buyer and they say, "Great, how do I send a wire?" And I say, "Well, I don't bank with XYZ Bank, so I'm not sure on how you send a wire. You should call XYZ Bank and ask them what their procedures are." Some banks will have a daily cap for how much can be sent. That's a consumer protection move. So maybe you need to inform them 2 weeks, 1 week before closing day, "Hey, I am closing on a house. I do plan on sending more than my daily cap. Is there any sort of documentation I can sign or I can do in order to make sure that I'm able to wire all of my money?" Some banks, especially small credit unions or smaller banks, they say, "You must come into our office in order to initiate a wire." Again, this is all consumer protection, because my second favorite thing about my job is informing people about wire fraud and keeping them safe. And banks have the same responsibility. And it may look like a daily cap. It may look like coming into a brick and mortar bank before you can send a wire. But finding that out when you have a 2 p.m. closing and you're going to leave at 3 o'clock to go send your wire can be a pretty iffy thing. We've had some clients who have had to fly out to New York, California, Chicago in order to initiate their wire.
Wherever the funds are.
And,
so true.
And so we want to make sure.
Now, who would think of that in today's world? You wouldn't think you'd have to fly to wherever your funds are at to initiate that.
Exactly.
Yeah, depending on where they have them stationed. Yeah. Also, there's a funding cutoff. So for me, as I'm conducting an office and making sure money is and everything gets funded by that last day of the month, you need to make sure that everything is in funding status. 2:30, 3 o'clock, I think, is the latest, right, to release a wire to get it to somebody else, isn't there?
So
I think it's before then, isn't it? Or is it?
And that might be Eastern time, which might be 1 o'clock our time, possibly.
As I understand, the Federal Reserve closes at 5 p.m. Central Time. So that too is another factor to come into place. Now, Midtown Title, we have our escrow account through a bank that allows us to send and receive wires until 5 p.m. That is the latest I have ever heard of. Most title companies, I would say a lot of them are around 4:30, but some of them are as early as 2 o'clock. And I, not too long ago, we called a courier. We got the courier amped up, running. "You got to get down to Dixon today because we're going to make this happen." And then my warranty deed arrived at 2:15 just to find out that their wire cutoff was 2 o'clock. And in my mind, I thought, I wish I'd have known that.
Yeah, before, right.
And that's a really important topic that if we want to simplify this, because some folks aren't going to get into the weeds maybe of this, but remember a couple of things, okay? First of all, manage the process, okay, first of all, but one of them is try to avoid closing on a Friday afternoon. Try to avoid closing on the last day of the month. Try to close before noon when you do set up a closing. I've written it in the contract at times. This transaction shall be closed on both sides by 12 p.m. Just to make sure these kind of things again don't happen, because there are banks that the cutoff is 2, and when you're having that 1 o'clock closing and their cutoff is at 2 o'clock. You're probably not going to get access to the house if you're a buyer, and the seller has the ability to say, "No, you're not. I don't have my funds, so I'm not going to allow you to stay in." And then guess what? Guess who's staying in some temporary housing for that night or that weekend with the family who flew in to help you move and all these kind of things. That's why this is so important.
And going back to, that's why picking the right professionals, communicating. I'm writing notes here that I can even add to my system to spark more questions, more conversation. I think the more that we know early on will make a smoother, experience at the end. Talking about timing, there's going back to, there's a pre-qual, there's a pre-approval, there's an underwriting, right? Approval. There's a reason why I and my personal team, we ask for documents early, right? And we are always trying to get documents early, because when something gets slowed, everything slows, right? And so as a woman who tries to guarantee her word, you as well, again, we're only as good as the timing, and the information that's provided, right? And so the faster we can get the information, the quicker we can see any bit of concern, right? And then grants us enough time to fix, any concern. So I would, as the CEO of your own business, I would start to script in the importance of, right, to make this transaction so successful. It is key to encourage you, client A, to get all documentation. Don't piecemeal. Try to get it all done right up front, right? So you are good to go. Because I'm telling you the story after story, the loan after loan that crosses my desk on things that are blowing up at the last minute could have been caught, right? Early on. Example, tax returns, review, right? Or like little extra certifications that are going back to the wording of timing. They should have been caught on day 1, day 2, right? Versus 24 hours prior to closing. And then that falls apart. And then you find out by speaking to you that not only is there one person behind this transaction, there's 2, 3, and 4 people in line, right? That need to close. And then all of a sudden nobody's closing and everybody's in uproar. That is a big reason why a lot of the builders require all closings to happen on a Thursday versus a Friday. So they buy themselves that time for the just in case, right? That wiggle room. Planning ahead, I think, is the key to all things. And I always say in my office, and they roll their eyes at me at this point, like I've been their mom for 17,000 years, but you got to be thinking 2 steps ahead. You got to be thinking 2 steps ahead, right? Everything has some sort of something that could blow up, but you got to be ready to go, and you got to be on your tippy toes at all times, I think.
And that's such an excellent point about back-to-back closings. So in title, we have what we call domino closings, and sometimes those dominoes are 5 dominoes long. So what I mean is, Monty, let's say you're representing the Joneses, and the Joneses are selling their property on Main Street in order to buy on Maple Street. Well, the Joneses are selling to the Smiths, who are selling another property so that they can buy the Joneses Main Street, so that the Joneses can then buy Maple Street.
I feel like we're in a math equation with my 11-year-old.
Yes, like that's what
I think I failed that question.
But that's what we entitle an escrow are dealing with, because we are so focused on our clients, the Joneses. We need to get them sold and then purchased. But we also have to be mindful that the Joneses are buying from someone. They're selling
their
to someone else.
Their money's coming from somewhere else.
And these sellers are likely buying from someone else. So I will talk to the other title company on each side of my transaction. And if I hear them say, this is back to back for my clients, I know that's a red flag for me. I need to make a note of this. This needs to become a priority. Monty, let's schedule them at 9 a.m. for their 9 a.m. for their sale, 10 a.m. for their purchase. Let's make this one a priority, because I know that we are in the middle of this domino effect. When one falls, all the rest have to.
And what about the financing for like Maple Street or Smith Street?
What happens when it doesn't? Now, we often are in a position where our sellers will be very aggravated that the buyers aren't closing, and we have to say, you have to understand, it's not CareyAnn's loan. The buyer's loan is not the issue. The issue is the loan of the buyers of their property. And so they're all good to go. CareyAnn's all set. It's further back in this domino. So the more communicative we can be, both in title and escrow and as agents, to say, listen, we are in the middle of this 5-point domino. We are at the end of this 5-point domino closing. Then we can start to move ahead. And that may look like, hey, it might be a little inconvenient, but what do you say we do your sale at 4 o'clock on Tuesday, and then we'll come back and we'll do your purchase at 9 o'clock on Wednesday, or what have you. And thinking creatively on our timing in order to make sure that every single one of those dominoes goes as swiftly as possible.
And I think when it comes to the dominoes, going back to you being the captain of your own ship, the listener is really thinking 2 steps ahead on that, right? Don't just accept a pre-approval that's just a piece of paper. Ask lots of questions. Make sure you know that the financing is good to go. Make sure you speak in a very stern voice that states that, hey, if this deal goes sideways, 7 other families, are going to be up a creek type of thing. I mean, you and I witnessed that with another transaction that almost that happened, last month. And it's super sad. And I'm calling a lender from another mortgage company trying to figure out.
I'm still amazed that you did that
CareyAnn. Transaction, right? To try to
manage
put it together.
Manage another lender so that the clients weren't hurt. I really appreciate you doing that.
And again, sometimes it takes a village. It goes back to taking a village. There's a bigger stance, right? I think there's some of us that have been in this business a long time that understand there is so much. It's more than the one transaction, right? It is helping that next family create an opportunity. But you and I both know, going back to timing, that the narrative has changed over the years. I'm still getting contracts before applications, right? I'm still getting people that are finding their dream home and telling Agent A that I'm good, Monty, I'm good, right?
Bought a house in 1937.
I'm good. And so then you realize that in their mind, they are great, right? But that great doesn't equal proper qualification sometimes, right? And I can give you all kinds of different options. You may not like the option that you actually are qualified on. So then they start to backpedal. I remember when I was selling that one house, let's not actually bring that one up, but going back to that, they decided they didn't like the terms of the loan, right? After I moved all my furniture out of this house and a day before closing decide to pull the denied card because they didn't like the terminology, of that particular loan. You just don't know, right, what's going to happen. So asking those questions early, working with true professionals that do think 2 steps ahead. Now, Roz is speaking of a way that they cross their T's and dot their I's, right? That is a protection. All of us doing things the right way sometimes does take time, right? And so we need to take that into consideration. You want things done the right way. You want to work with true professionals that protect both you and your consumer. So adding that into the mix, right? So kind of going back, like for us, I would like a CTC 3 days, 5 days, land on 3. Right, type of thing is what I want. And I also want docs out and the loan pre-funded, right? That is what my expectations are as a senior loan officer. I already have that. That's instilled in my being, right? And so, but does every consumer allow me to do that? Not always, if they're not going to provide all the documentation. So you'll find sometimes we reach out and we say, hey, Monty, I need your help, right? And get them engaged again because we're lacking. But when that happens, right, if loan officer A is not focused, working very closely with title company and or the agent, nobody's on the same page. They're just going to do it at their timing. And what is a closing date really? I believe in never missing closing dates, but sometimes, it's just a date on a contract.
It is contractually, the people are beholden contractually to do it. So
that's what I'm saying. But then all of a sudden it's like, hey, sorry, we can't meet that closing day. Well, we should have known that 30 days ago or 26 days, prior to. So timing is key.
What is it they say? They say good, fast, and cheap. You can have 2, but you can't have 3.
Yeah, and I'm really because I am fast. And I'm cost efficient. I don't say cheap, but you get the whole kit and caboodle. There's some of us that understand that there's a need for this, and this, right? But there's others that just aren't thinking 2 steps. So ask all the right questions.
I should clarify. Fast is we're not closing on this loan product in 2 days.
Oh, yeah, right.
Ladies, we need to wrap this up.
We do.
Thank you. What a great conversation.
So
Roz, thank you for joining us.
My pleasure.
And let me just say one quick thing about both these ladies. There's a reason why I only use one mortgage company. There's a reason why I only use one title company, is because they're the best of the best. Now, when you get to be an old cranky fart like me, you insist on the best. That's just the way it works, okay? 3,000 sales into my career, and I'm more than ever, I'm going to guard my reputation with my heart. And one way you do that is surround yourself with the best. Midtown's the best title company. CareyAnn and her team at CMG is the best lender, hands down,
Thank
period.
you.
Thank
We're
you very
grateful
much.
for always thinking of us, and we are grateful for you for listening. You've been listening to the Talk of Music City Real Estate.